Hi everyone, welcome back to Cat's Book Nut. Today is Sunday, October 15th, and as I said yesterday in my video, today I would do a book review. This is the first one I've ever done for BookTube, so I took notes and we will see how this goes. So the book review today is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. This story focuses on Ursula Todd and the many, many lives that she goes through and things that she changes throughout her story. So the synopsis of this one, let's do that before I get into my notes so you guys know what I'm talking about. I also feel like I need to preface this with this is a spoiler review, so if you're not up for spoils, go read the book and then come back and watch the video. We're good. So synopsis. On a cold and snowy night in 1910, Ursula Todd is born to an English banker and his wife. Ursula dies before she can draw her first breath. On that same cold and snowy night, Ursula Todd is born, lets out a lusty wail, and embarks upon a life that will be, to say the least, unusual. For as she grows, she also dies, repeatedly in a variety of ways, while the young century marches on towards its second cataclysmic world war. Does Ursula's apparently infinite number of lives give her the power to save the world from its inevitable destiny? And if she can, will she? Startlingly imaginative, darkly comic, deeply poignant, this is Kate Atkinson at her absolute best. So, with that said, I do need to preface my review with this book is about World War I, has elements from World War I, World War II, the 6 Days War. There are some trigger warnings about Judaism and Nazis, and there is a trigger warning for rape that I'll mention later on. There was something else that she mentions in this book that I'll get to as I'm going through my review. But all in all, it was a really well-written book. I listened to this, so I didn't actually physically read it, but I did make physical notes, as you can see. So, with that, each post-it note that you guys can see right there is a life. She ends up, and I don't know if I marked all of her lives down, but there's 15 different attempts in her having a life. And it was very, like, each life, there's similar things, similar events to it, but then she also has very, very different things happen to her throughout her different lives. So, the book starts off with Ursula killing Hitler, and you realize later on in the book why this event is important, because it does show back up later on. So, once you get past the life intro where Ursula kills Hitler and dies herself, then you get to attempt 1 where Ursula is born only to die. You get to meet Bridget and you get to meet Sylvie. Sylvie is Ursula's mother. Bridget is sort of the young housekeeper. And then Mrs. Glover shows up later on too. So, attempt birth 2. The doctor finally shows up and Ursula makes it into the world. In this chapter, you get to meet Hugh, who is Ursula's father, and Maurice and Pamela, who are her pre-existing siblings, who they don't change. So once Ursula is born, anything that happened before that doesn't change for her. This very interesting section delves more into the family, why Sylvie is the way she is, and just general life for the Todds. Also goes into how Sylvie and Hugh met. She was a penniless artist assistant, and he was a banker. Kind of shows a great love story. Also introduces the reader to Izzy, who is Hugh's sister, who gives birth to a baby that she had with a French lover who is married. And the baby ends up with a German family, which, because this is 1910, she can't really have an abortion, but being that the family is German, that that does play a huge role moving forward. Because World War I, World War II, Germany, yeah. Ursula gets to age 4 in this one and goes into the ocean, and being unable to swim back, she dies. So, yeah. That's how she ends round 2. Attempt 3. You is around for Ursula's birth this time. Ursula and Pam are saved from the ocean by Mr. Archibald, who is an artist who just happened to be on the beach. He was on the beach the first time that they made it to the ocean, but the second time he actually lives. There is, like I mentioned, there's a comment in here about Mr. Cole, who is the Todd's neighbor, being Jewish. Sylvie said Jewish in the same voice that she would use for Catholic, intrigued yet unsettled by such exoticism. A few more pages on Sylvie's speculation on how the Coles were different from the Todds in, did they practice, did they not practice, different things like that. Eventually, Teddy, who is the 4th Todd child in the story, is born right after you leaves for war. Not too much long after that. Yeah. So the way Ursula dies in attempt 3 is Maurice pushes her out the window and she falls to her death. So attempt 4 starts again with the day Ursula is born, but then it picks back up around the time of the window incident, and this one was a little bit sad because I didn't realize that the Spanish influenza right after World War I was such a big deal. And that is actually how Ursula and Bridget die in attempt number 4, is Bridget and her beau go to celebrate, I think they call it Armitage. I think that's how it's pronounced. But they go celebrate the end of the war in 1918 in London, and Bridget comes back, brings the flu back into the house, and dies at the house, and then is followed by Ursula. So Ursula, on attempt 5, Ursula realizes that this is going to happen, and she tries to prevent Bridget from getting into the house after she comes back with Clarence. She doesn't, so Teddy dies in this version, and then Ursula follows suit. Attempt 6 is again the flu happened and everybody died. Attempt 7 was the flu. She finally ended up, I want to say, pushing Bridget down the stairs, so that way Bridget did not go to London for the end of the war event. So because Bridget didn't go, nobody died. But she ends up dying. Oh no, in attempt 6 she does in attempt 7 she does end up dying again of the flu. It's attempt 8 where she doesn't die. This is where Ursula is taught what deja vu is, because she has these feelings like this has already happened before, or I know this is going to happen. So eventually she makes it to 1947 and dies of gas inhalation while she is thinking about how Teddy died. And it kind of makes the reader wonder how Teddy died, and that does get discussed later on. But next to Teddy's picture, there's a medal that Ursula got, and the end of the chapter mentions Lucky, who comes up in another chapter later on. So after she dies in that attempt number 9, this one's actually really thick because there's a lot of information in this chapter that this is where the trigger warnings for the rape and abuse come in. So Ursula is 13. She's spending time with her Aunt Izzy in London. She sees Sylvie, her mother, on the arms of someone else who is not her father. And it gets the reader to wonder if Ursula got her rebirth, I would call it a power, but rebirth situation from her mother, because her mother is there and isn't in the same timeline that she is at that point. At 16, Ursula gets raped. She ends up having an abortion, and her mother blames everything that happens after that abortion and the reason she got raped on Ursula, which just doesn't make for great thoughts within Ursula, which is why she ends up, and I hate saying it that way, so I apologize up front. If you've been through this situation, I am sorry. I have not, but it's in the book, so. But Ursula ends up with a physically and mentally abusive husband named Derek, who manipulated her into thinking that his life was one way, and it actually turned out to not be anywhere close to what he told her it was. So after one night of abuse, I mean, literally, he knocked her teeth in, face was bloody, bruises everywhere. She finally escapes and goes to her Aunt Izzy's house, only to have Derek show up on the doorstep, and Teddy's there. And the next thing you know, Ursula is being choked out by Derek and welcoming death like a friend, because she's just done. So, moving on. Attempt 10. Ursula stops the rape from happening and ends up stopping Nancy getting murdered. Nancy got murdered, I want to say, in attempt... Maybe it was attempt 9. Not too long before Ursula left to go to Izzy's house to have the baby, to have the abortion. So Nancy and Teddy end up together in this one. Ursula never meets Derek, but ends up with a lover that's married and has his own children, and ends up dying in a bomb during the Blitz of 1940 at 30 years old. Attempt 11. Makes it to the bombing in 1940, and meets Lucky, who is the dog that Teddy has in the picture in 1947. But Lucky is not in the building. She sees him outside of the building and goes to rescue him and ends up dying again because a wall falls on her. The same night. So, same situation, she just doesn't die in the house anymore. And I don't know if she dies anymore in the house. I want to say she actually died twice in the house before she ended up with Lucky. So, not remembering that part. But attempt 12. She ends up going to Germany after graduation in 1926, meets the girls of the family that she's staying with, love Hitler, just adore him, believe his philosophies are correct, and just follow him to the letter. Again, this is 1926, so before the World War II even started being talked about, people were falling all over him. She ends up meeting Ava, and Ava becomes a family friend of the person that she's staying with. So she ends up spending a lot of time with Hitler and falls in love with a German, has a baby, and he dies somewhere along the line. The husband dies somewhere along the line. We end up in 1945, where Ursula finds out that her father died a year and a couple months before the end of the war. Just a whole bunch of stuff happens, and she ends up committing suicide because her daughter isn't going to make it. She's not going to make it. There's no food. There's no hope. she just takes it into her own hands and kills herself. So, attempt 13. Ursula never goes to Germany. This one is actually a really thick chapter because there's a lot of stuff in this chapter too that I'm going to skip over. We, the reader, learn how Teddy dies and how Ursula and the family move on afterwards. You ends up dying, Sylvie dies, and Izzy gets snubbed. And so does Morris. Just two people that you don't necessarily like as a reader, but that are there because they are part of the story. Ursula ends up making it to 1967 in this part, which is the furthest she goes in the book because there's not much left to it. And one of the thoughts right before she dies is her nephew. She's talking to her nephew about what would happen if Hitler never, like if somebody went back and killed Hitler. So in attempt 14, that's exactly what she does, because a young Ursula ends up dealing with the death of her cousin because Sylvie and you end up raising the baby, but at age 4 he goes out into the ocean, and instead of Ursula and Pam dying, or Ursula dying, it ends up being her cousin. And then Nancy dies in this version too, and both Benjamin Cole and Ursula were close enough to stop the death, so that mentally affects Ursula totally, and ends up putting her into a mental institution later on in the chapter, not too many pages after that though, where she forms a plan to kill Hitler and does so, which is in the first chapter of the book, which is how we get introduced to the character of Ursula. And of course she dies. So, in attempt 15, it doesn't say how Ursula dies in this one, but Nancy lives and they find Teddy in 1945 in a pub after he's been dead for 2 years. So it takes a couple pages to talk about Teddy is actually alive, which I believe feeds into the second book in this one, which is A God in the Ruins. I think that's the name of it. But it does feed into another book. So, and then in the last chapter, or the last couple pages, last page actually, is attempt 16, which is the end of the story. So, probably doesn't make you guys want to read it, but that's my first book review. I will take better notes next time, so that way I kind of tell you guys more interesting facts. But with that, thank you guys for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know if you've read this book, what your thoughts were on this book, or if you even want to pick this book up now that you've listened to me talk about it. With that, hope you guys are having a fabulous Sunday, and I will talk to you guys again on Wednesday. Bye.